You've entered void of rules, where chaos reigns and darkness consumes all. In this twisted realm where all laws have crumbled, only one rule remains, and those who break it are cast into eternal digital oblivion. The rule is simple: subscribe. We're almost at 9,000 corrupted souls, but the void hungers for more. Our goal is 10,000 subscribers before this year bleeds into darkness. Will you join our legion, or face the consequences of defying the void? Now let's dive into today's story. My name is Dr. Silas Mercer. What I'm about to tell you happened 4 months ago, but it feels like a lifetime. Some nights I still wake up hearing that voice, gentle and impossibly old, speaking words that should have been forgotten 3,000 years ago. This is my testimony. This is what happened when I gave a voice to something that was meant to stay silent forever. I've spent my entire adult life studying ancient texts, not because I'm religious, quite the opposite actually. I grew up in a fundamentalist household where every question was answered with scripture, every doubt met with prayer. When my brother Owen died 6 years ago, when he made the choice to end his own suffering, the church told me it was God's plan. They told me to have faith. I chose archaeology instead. If I couldn't find comfort in their answers, I'd find truth in the dust of dead civilizations. My home in Vermont became more museum than residence. Fragments of pottery from Mesopotamia sat on bookshelves next to Coptic manuscripts. My living room smelled like old paper and the particular mustiness that clings to anything that's been buried for centuries. My mentor, Dr. Helena Frost, once told me I don't study the past. I hide in it. She wasn't wrong. October 4th, 2023. At 3:47 in the morning, everything changed. I was awake as usual, working through a translation of an Aramaic prayer scroll when the email arrived. No sender name. Subject line: the unspoken name, primary source material. Just attachments. 9 high-resolution photographs of papyrus fragments with carbon dating analysis included. 4th century CE, authenticated. But when I zoomed in on the content, my hand started shaking. The text was in Coptic, but the structure was wrong, using a cipher that shouldn't exist for another 1,000 years. I spent 3 days decoding it, barely sleeping, barely eating. My office at the university became a cave of scattered notes and empty coffee cups. I cancelled my classes, ignored phone calls. The cipher was brilliant, layering 3 different encryption methods on top of each other. Whoever created this didn't want it read easily, but they wanted it preserved. That distinction mattered. They could have destroyed it, but instead they hid it, like a message in a bottle thrown into the ocean of time, hoping the right person would find it. When I finally cracked the pattern, I stood up from my desk so fast I knocked over cold coffee across my notes. The first passage read, "I am the one who wept when Eve ate the fruit, for I alone among the heavenly host understood what she would lose." First person. An angel speaking in first person, claiming to have witnessed the fall. That doesn't exist in canonical texts. Angels are messengers, warriors, witnesses described by others. They don't give testimonies. They don't have inner lives. They don't confess. But this one did. The fragments told a story I'd never encountered in 20 years of biblical scholarship. An angel who disagreed with God, who was punished not for lust or pride but for compassion, who was systematically erased from scripture. One phrase repeated across the fragments like a drumbeat: they removed my name from the book, but they could not remove what I witnessed. Another passage stopped my breath. I've stood in the shadow of every grave ever dug. I've heard every prayer that went unanswered. I've seen what humans become when they believe no one is watching, and I have loved them anyway. The final decoded message was coordinates in southern Jordan, near Petra, with a caption beneath, "The monastery of endless vigil. We are the last who remember. Come before we are gone." The papyrus was real. I'd verified it 3 times with different labs. Someone had gone to enormous trouble to hide this, and someone else wanted it found. The question was why? Why now? Why me? I picked up my phone and called Felix Strand at 2 a.m. He answered on the second ring, groggy. "Silas, it's 2 a.m. I said, "I need you to come to Jordan with me. I found something." There was a pause. What kind of something? I looked at the translation on my screen. The kind that changes everything. Felix is 29, makes documentary videos about forgotten religious sites for YouTube. We met 3 years ago when he was filming a piece about the Nag Hammadi library and needed an expert translator. He's got good instincts, better equipment, and most importantly, he asks the right questions. He doesn't sensationalize. He wants truth, whatever that looks like. I also called Cassandra Vega, the best linguist I know. She's a skeptic who specializes in dead languages, the kind that haven't been spoken in millennia. She's also brutally honest. If this was a hoax, if I was chasing shadows because I couldn't let go of my grief, she'd tell me. We needed that balance. October 18th, we met in Amman. The flight over had given me time to doubt everything. What if this was an elaborate prank? What if someone was exploiting my brother's death, knowing I'd be vulnerable to anything that promised answers about suffering and meaning? But I couldn't shake the feeling that the papyrus was genuine. The aging was right, the materials were right, and the content, the theological implications, they were too sophisticated to be a simple hoax. Cass leaned against the rental truck, arms crossed, dark hair pulled back tight. She looked tired. "You dragged me away from a symposium in Prague for mystery coordinates. This better be good, Silas." I showed her the translations on my laptop and watched her face change. Her skepticism didn't disappear, but it cracked. Her eyes narrowed as she read, lips moving slightly as she worked through the ancient Coptic. "This is authentic 4th century Coptic?" I nodded. Authenticated by 3 separate labs. Carbon dating, material analysis, linguistic patterns. It's real. She scrolled through the images. The cipher structure is remarkable. This isn't just hiding information. This is hiding it in a way that requires serious scholarship to decode. Whoever wrote this wanted to be understood, but only by someone who cared enough to do the work. Felix was already checking his camera equipment. Batteries charging, memory cards formatted. So, what are we looking for? A church? A cave? Some kind of archaeological site? I pulled up the coordinates on a map. A monastery carved into the cliffs near Petra. According to the message, it's called the Monastery of Endless Vigil. There's no record of it on any modern map, no mention in any historical document I can find. It's like it's been deliberately forgotten. Cass looked up from the laptop. Or it never existed, and we're about to waste a week in the desert chasing a fantasy. I couldn't argue with that. Only one way to find out. We hired a local guide named Rashid. He was in his 50s, weathered face and calm eyes that suggested he'd seen enough of life to not be easily surprised. When I told him where we wanted to go, though, he went very still. His hand stopped mid-motion as he was checking our supplies. "The Red Cliffs to the north?" I confirmed yes. He was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the desert. My grandmother spoke of monks in those cliffs. She said they guarded something. Not treasure, not relics. A confession. She said it was a confession from something that shouldn't be able to confess. He looked at me directly. She also said the monks all died in a single night. No sickness, no violence. They simply stopped breathing, all of them, at the same moment. The Bedouin tribes wouldn't go near the place after that. They said the confession took them. The drive took us deep into the Jordanian desert. October heat still brutal during the day, the kind that makes the horizon shimmer and dance. We travelled for hours, following coordinates on a GPS that kept losing signal. The landscape turned increasingly desolate, red rock formations rose like broken teeth against the cloudless sky. The wind carried fine sand that got into everything, into our clothes, our equipment, the corners of our eyes. Rashid drove with the confidence of someone who knew these roads, or the lack of roads, intimately. We passed the occasional Bedouin camp in the distance, black tents stark against the red sand. None of them close to our destination. As the sun began to set on the first day, painting the desert in shades of copper and gold, Rashid pulled the truck to a stop. "We camp here tonight. The canyon is too dangerous to enter in darkness. The walls are narrow. One wrong turn and you're trapped." We set up camp in the shadow of a massive rock formation. The temperature dropped quickly once the sun disappeared. Desert nights are cold in ways that surprise people. We built a fire, and Rashid made tea, strong and sweet. Felix reviewed his equipment. Cass studied the translations I'd made, cross-referencing them with other apocryphal texts on her tablet. I sat and stared at the stars, more visible here than anywhere I'd seen in years. The Milky Way stretched overhead like a river of light. "Tell me about your brother," Cass said quietly. She didn't look up from her tablet, but I knew she was listening. I hadn't talked about Owen much since his death. Most people got uncomfortable. They didn't know what to say. They offered platitudes that felt like sand in my mouth. But Cass was different. She understood grief. She'd lost her father to cancer when she was 19. "He was brilliant," I said. "Degree in philosophy. Could argue any side of any position. He used to drive me crazy because he'd take the opposite view of whatever I said, just to see if I could defend my position. But he wasn't being contrary. He genuinely wanted to understand all perspectives." I paused. He struggled with depression for years. High functioning, they call it. He held down a job, had friends, seemed okay on the surface, but underneath, he was drowning. The fire crackled. Felix had his camera off, just sitting with us. "What happened?" he asked. I picked up a handful of sand, let it run through my fingers. He left a note. Just one line. Ecclesiastes 1:2. "Vanity of vanities, all is vanity." Then he took a bottle of pills and went to sleep. His neighbour found him 3 days later. The words came out flat, emotionless. I'd said them so many times they'd lost their power to hurt. Or maybe I'd just learned to bury the hurt deeper. The church said it was a sin, that suicide was a rejection of God's gift of life. They wouldn't hold a funeral service for him. We had to do it at a secular funeral home. My mother cried through the whole thing, not just for Owen, but for what the church's rejection meant about where his soul was. Cass finally looked up. "And you've been searching for answers ever since?" I nodded. I kept thinking, if I could just understand the theological basis for suffering, if I could find some text, some ancient wisdom that explained why God allows pain, maybe it would make sense, maybe I could accept it. I laughed, but there was no humour in it. 20 years of study, and I'm no closer to an answer than I was the day he died. Rashid poured more tea. "Perhaps you are looking in the wrong place," he said. "You seek understanding in books, but some truths can only be learned through experience." I didn't know then how right he was. October 21st, just after dawn, we found it. We broke camp as the sun was rising, painting the desert in shades of rose and amber. Rashid led us into a canyon so narrow we had to walk single file. The walls rose 30 feet on either side, smooth red sandstone carved by ancient water. Our footsteps echoed. The temperature dropped as we went deeper, the canyon walls blocking the sun. We walked for nearly an hour, the path twisting and turning. Several times I thought we'd reached a dead end, only to discover the path continued at a sharp angle. It was a natural maze. Felix sent his drone up first when we finally reached an opening. We needed to see what we were dealing with before committing to going further. The footage came back on his controller screen, and all four of us stopped breathing. carved directly into a cliff face, invisible from ground level unless you knew exactly where to look, was a massive structure. It wasn't built, it was carved, cut directly from the living rock like Petra, but older somehow, more primal. The entrance was accessed through the canyon we were in, but the structure itself was carved into the cliff face above us, only visible from the air. We hiked towards it, following a path that wound up the canyon wall. Ancient steps had been cut into the rock, worn smooth by centuries of feet. Some were crumbling. Felix went first with his camera, documenting everything. Cass followed, then me, then Rashid. The steps were steep, and more than once I had to press myself against the rock face, aware of the drop behind me. It took us another hour to reach the entrance. By the time we did, we were exhausted, sweating despite the cool air. The monastery was larger than I'd expected. The entrance alone was 15 feet tall, carved with intricate geometric patterns. But what stopped us was the stone slab sealing the doorway. It was covered in inscriptions in 12 different languages, layered over each other, added at different times by different hands. Ancient Greek, Arabic, Hebrew, Aramaic, Coptic, Latin, and 6 others I'd need time to identify. Someone had spent centuries adding warnings to this door. I approached slowly, running my fingers over the carved text. The stone was cool under my hands, despite the desert heat. I started with the Greek because it was the clearest. My voice echoed in the canyon. Beyond this threshold, witnesses become the witnessed. Felix filmed the inscription. Cass was already photographing it from multiple angles, taking notes on her tablet. I moved to the Arabic. Turn back, for memory here has teeth. The Hebrew made my voice catch. Shomer Bli Shem, guardian without name. Rashid had stopped at the base of the steps. He wasn't coming any closer. I could see it in his posture, the way he held himself. He'd come this far out of obligation, but he wouldn't enter. Cass and I spent an hour carefully removing the seal, using archaeological tools. We had to be precise. One wrong move and we could damage the inscriptions, or, worse, bring the entrance down on us. The seal had been placed with extraordinary skill, fitted so perfectly into the doorway that finding the seams took 20 minutes. We used thin metal wedges, tapping them gently with a rubber mallet, working our way around the edges. Sweat dripped into my eyes. My shoulders ached, but slowly, imperceptibly, the stone began to shift. At 2:34 in the afternoon, with one final push, the seal moved aside enough for us to enter, and the temperature change was immediate and dramatic. Inside was at least 40 degrees colder than the desert air outside. Our breath fogged instantly. It was like stepping into a refrigerator. Felix swore. That's not natural. There's no way the temperature should drop that much. Cass pulled out a thermometer. 48 degrees Fahrenheit. Outside is over 90. The thermal difference doesn't make sense. But we'd come too far to turn back now. Felix's camera malfunctioned the moment we stepped through the entrance. The screen went grainy, filled with static. The timestamp corrupted into gibberish, numbers and symbols that didn't mean anything. He smacked it twice. That's weird. Brand new battery, fully charged this morning. He tried his backup camera. Same problem. Okay, that's really weird. Cass had her audio recorder running. She held it up, frowning. You guys hear that? We stood silent, listening. There was a sound underneath the silence. Rhythmic, like breathing, but wrong. The pattern was too slow. Inhalations every 45 seconds, maybe 50. Far too slow for any living thing. I said it was probably wind through the rock, some kind of natural acoustic effect, but I didn't believe it, and from the looks on their faces, neither did they. The entrance tunnel stretched ahead of us into darkness. Our flashlights cut through the gloom, beams dancing across smooth stone walls. The floor was level, carefully carved. This wasn't a natural cave. Every surface showed signs of intentional construction. We walked slowly, cautiously. The breathing sound continued, steady and wrong. The temperature kept dropping. By the time we reached the end of the tunnel, we could see our breath in thick clouds. The tunnel opened into a larger chamber, and as our flashlights swept across the space, we stopped, just stopped and stared. The monastery had been a living, working space once. Sleeping chambers lined one wall, stone shelves carved into the rock for storage, a refectory with long stone tables where monks would have taken their meals, cups and plates still present, covered in centuries of dust, a scriptorium with stone desks and dried ink pots, everything preserved by the dry desert air and the sealed entrance. It was like walking into a moment frozen in time. But something was deeply wrong. Every surface, every wall, every available space was covered in scratches. Deep gouges in the stone, as if fingernails had clawed at the walls over and over and over. Thousands of them. Tens of thousands. The scratches covered the sleeping chambers, the refectory, the corridors, everywhere. Cass approached one wall, shining her light on the marks. Her breath fogged the air in front of her face. These aren't random. They're words, Aramaic. The same phrase repeated thousands of times. Her voice was hushed, like we were in a church. Maybe we were. Felix moved closer, filming. What does it say? She traced the scratches with her finger, and I saw her hand was shaking slightly. It speaks with our dead. The words hung in the cold air. Felix's camera, despite its malfunction, was still recording audio. Later, when we listened back, we'd hear something underneath our voices. That same slow breathing, but also something else. Whispers, too faint to make out individual words, but definitely there. Neither Cass nor I spoke Aramaic into the recorder, but it was there anyway. We moved deeper into the monastery. Each step felt heavier, like the air itself was getting thicker. The sleeping chambers showed signs of panicked abandonment. Personal items scattered across the floor. A wooden cross broken in half. Stone pallets overturned. More scratches on the walls. So many the original smooth surface was barely visible. In one cell, we found a skeleton still on the sleeping pallet. The monk had died in his bed, hands folded across his chest, positioned for burial but never buried. His skull was turned toward the wall, and on that wall, scratched in Greek, "Forgive me, for I have seen the face of mercy," and it wept. The scriptorium was worse. This was where monks would have copied manuscripts, preserved sacred texts, continued the work of keeping knowledge alive. It was their purpose, but the room was destroyed, not by violence or natural disaster, by intent. Dozens of incomplete Bibles lay scattered across stone desks, pages torn out, spines broken, scrolls shredded into strips, clay tablets smashed into fragments. It was systematic destruction, but also selective. I picked up one of the Bibles carefully. The binding was intact, but pages were missing. Torn out so roughly the edges were ragged. Cass had 3 more open on different desks. Every single one has the same sections torn out. I examined them under my flashlight. She was right. Genesis chapter 6. The verses about the Watchers, the angels who came to earth and took human wives, all removed. Other sections too, parts of the book of Enoch, fragments of Jubilees, sections of Daniel. Anything that mentioned angels who fell not through pride or rebellion, but through other means. Angels who became too involved with humanity. Angels who cared too much. They were trying to erase something, I said, some specific piece of information. Cass was cataloguing the missing verses on her tablet, or they were trying to protect people from it. Felix found a journal in what must have been the abbot's chamber. The room was larger than the cells, with a window carved into the rock that looked out over the desert. The window was sealed now, blocked by fallen rock from outside. The journal was on a stone desk, leather cover cracked, but intact. Felix handled it carefully, aware of its age. It's in Latin, dated 1486. He held it closer to his light, and his face went pale. "Oh God!" I moved to read over his shoulder. The handwriting was shaky, barely legible in places. Brother Thaddeus heard it speak today. He screamed for 3 hours. He screams in languages he never learned. Languages that have been dead for 1,000 years. We have decided to seal the inner chamber. Brother Thaddeus begs us not to. He says it only wants to be remembered. He says it has been alone too long, but we cannot risk it. May God forgive us for what we leave imprisoned here. May God forgive us for being too weak to carry what it carries. My flashlight beam was shaking. I realized my hands were trembling. The temperature had dropped even further. It had to be close to freezing now. Felix's breath was coming in visible puffs. "There's more," he said, flipping pages carefully. "The next entry is a week later. Brother Thaddeus is dead. He stopped eating, stopped drinking, would not sleep. He kept writing on the walls. When we tried to stop him, he fought with strength he should not possess. On the 3rd day, he spoke in a voice not his own. He said, 'I have watched every sparrow fall. I have counted every tear. And you would have me be silent again.' Then he lay down and his heart stopped. Felix looked at me. 'Silas, what the hell is this place?' I couldn't answer. My mouth was dry. My heart was pounding. 'There's an inner chamber,' I finally said. We found the door at the deepest part of the monastery. The tunnel leading to it sloped downward, taking us into the heart of the cliff itself. The walls here were different, not carved with tools but smooth, almost polished, like they'd been worn down by something moving past them over and over across centuries. The breathing sound was louder here. We could feel it now, not just hear it. A pressure in the air that pulsed with each slow inhalation. The temperature continued to drop. Our breath came out in thick clouds that hung in the still air. The door was massive, solid stone, 10 feet tall and 6 feet wide, but carved with incredible detail. Images covered every inch of its surface, scenes from biblical history, but with an additional figure in each one, a figure that shouldn't be there. I recognized the scenes, the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve, leaving through the eastern gate. But in this carving, a 3rd figure stood at the edge of the garden, reaching toward them but unable to cross an invisible line. The flood, Noah's Ark, floating on endless water. But carved into the waves was that figure again, standing somehow on the water's surface, arms outstretched, the Tower of Babel, people scattering across the earth, the figure watching from above, Abraham and Isaac on Mount Moriah, the figure trying to stay Abraham's hand, Moses receiving the tablets, the figure standing behind him, the crucifixion, the figure at the foot of the cross. In every scene the figure had no face, where features should be just smooth blankness. It was unnerving seeing the absence repeated over and over. Above the door, carved in ancient Greek large enough to read even in our flashlight beams, "Here dwells Kharos, the Angel of Remembrance, who was unmade." I whispered the name. Kharos. It hit me like a physical force. The air seemed to thicken, the temperature to drop even further. I've never seen this name anywhere. Not in any biblical text, not in any apocryphal work, not in any historical document. It's not in the Book of Enoch, not in the Dead Sea Scrolls, not in the Nag Hammadi library. It's like this entity was completely erased. Cass was photographing the door, but her hands were shaking. This level of systematic removal, it would take centuries, multiple councils, coordinated effort across different sects and regions. She looked at me. "Whatever this is, the early church went to extraordinary lengths to make sure it was forgotten. Felix had gotten his camera working again somehow. It was still glitchy, but recording. This is what you came for, isn't it? Whatever sent you those fragments, it's behind this door. I nodded. We'd come too far to turn back now, but I was afraid, genuinely afraid, in a way I hadn't been since I was a child. The door wasn't locked. There was no mechanism, no bar, no seal. It was simply stone fitted into stone with such precision that it took all three of us pushing to move it. The grinding sound of stone against stone echoed through the tunnel. It was loud enough that I worried it might bring the ceiling down, but slowly, inch by inch, the door opened inward, and the chamber beyond made us stop. Just stop, and stare in silence. The chamber was circular, 30 feet in diameter, the walls curving up to a domed ceiling 40 feet above. Every inch of surface was covered in writing. Thousands of languages layered over each other, added across millennia. Cuneiform pressed into clay that mortared into the stone walls. Greek carved directly into the rock. Arabic calligraphy flowing across plaster that had been applied over the Greek. Hebrew painted in faded ink. Latin etched over the Hebrew. Coptic, Aramaic, Sanskrit, Egyptian hieroglyphs. Languages I recognized and languages I didn't. All telling the same story from different perspectives, different hands, different eras. The chamber was a chronicle of obsession spanning thousands of years. In the center sat a stone basin, 3 feet across, filled with black water, perfectly still. Not a ripple on the surface despite us entering the room. The water reflected nothing, just absorbed light like a hole. Around the basin, the floor was carved with symbols. Not religious symbols, something older. Circles within circles, lines connecting points, geometries that hurt to look at because they suggested depth that shouldn't exist on a flat surface. Felix's camera suddenly began working properly. The screen cleared. The timestamp corrected itself. But as I glanced at his screen, I saw something that made my stomach drop. The camera was showing things we couldn't see with our eyes. Shadows moving across the walls, but not our shadows. These moved independently, flowing across the inscriptions like water, gathering and dispersing. And they were forming shapes, letters, words being written in real time by nothing visible. Felix turned the camera toward us, then back to the walls. "Are you seeing this?" His voice was tight. On screen, the shadows were writing new messages in languages that overlapped the ancient text, modern English. "You came, thank you, I've been so alone." Cass made a sound in her throat, not quite a gasp. "This isn't possible. Shadows don't write. Shadows don't have agency." But we were watching it happen. Felix panned the camera slowly around the room. Everywhere his lens pointed, the shadows formed words, desperate messages. "Please don't leave. Please speak my name. Please remember me." I approached the walls, my flashlight beam dancing across the inscriptions. My academic training took over, pushing down the fear. This was what I did. I read ancient texts. I translated dead languages. I found meaning in the fragments of the past. I found the oldest text I could identify, pressed into clay tablets that had been embedded in the stone. Akkadian, possibly 4,000 years old, maybe older. The language of Mesopotamia, of Babylon, of the first great civilizations. I read aloud, translating as I went, my voice echoing in the circular chamber. I am Kharos. I was made to witness without forgetting, but I forgot my purpose and remembered theirs instead. As the words left my mouth, the water in the basin rippled. No one had touched it. No vibration could have reached it. We were standing still, barely breathing. But the surface broke into perfect concentric circles, spreading outward from the center like something had dropped into it from above. But nothing had. The ceiling was empty. The ripples continued, regular, rhythmic. like a heartbeat. The temperature plummeted further. It had to be below freezing now, but somehow the water wasn't ice. Cass grabbed my arm hard enough to hurt. "Silas, we need to leave, right now." But I couldn't stop. Something compelled me forward. It wasn't force. It was more like gravity, like I was falling towards something inevitable. I moved around the room, reading fragments from different eras, different hands, each inscription a piece of a larger story. I stood beside Adam and wept when he named his dead son. Abel's blood cried out from the ground, but I was forbidden to answer. The water rippled again, faster now. I stood beside Noah and heard him curse God for making him survive. He stood on Mount Ararat and looked at the world drowned, and he begged to have died with them. More ripples. The water was moving constantly now, roiling without wind or touch. I stood beside Abraham and tried to stay his hand. I whispered in his ear, "You do not have to do this." But he could not hear me. The deaf cannot hear the mute. For this interference, I was silenced. A voice spoke. Not from any direction, from inside my head, inside all our heads simultaneously. Gentle, infinitely sorrowful, like the echo of 1,000 funeral bells. Like wind through a graveyard, like the last breath of every dying thing that ever lived. "Silas Mercer, you speak my words after so long. You give me shape again. You give me voice." Felix and Cass ran. I heard their footsteps echoing back through the tunnel, frantic and stumbling. Felix's camera clattered to the floor where he dropped it, still recording. But I couldn't move. My legs wouldn't respond to my brain's panicked commands to run. I was rooted to the spot, flashlight hanging loose in my hand. The voice continued, and as it spoke, images flashed through my mind. Not memories. Too vivid. Too clear. Too detailed. Like I was suddenly standing in multiple places at once, experiencing multiple moments simultaneously. An angel at Eden's edge, reaching toward two figures, walking away into wilderness, trying to cross the boundary, but unable. The boundary wasn't visible. It wasn't fire or wall. It was just a line that could not be crossed, a limit that could not be exceeded. The angel's hand pressed against it like glass. On the other side, Eve looked back once. For just a moment, her eyes met the angel's. She saw it. She saw its grief. Then Adam took her hand and led her away, and she didn't look back again. The same figure standing on a mountainside as water rose and rose and rose, the flood covering everything, the screams of the drowning carrying across the water, thousands of voices crying out, praying, begging, and the angel standing in the rain, unable to move, forbidden to act, forced to witness every single death, every last breath, every final prayer. The water rose over the mountains. The voices stopped one by one, until there was only silence and rain and an angel standing in water up to its knees, weeping tears that fell into the flood. Standing in a garden at night, Gethsemane, a man praying alone, his disciples sleeping nearby. The man was weeping, begging for the cup to pass from him, begging for another way. The angel stood 3 feet away, close enough to touch him, close enough to offer comfort, but forbidden. The command was absolute: do not interfere, witness only. The man prayed until his sweat became blood. The angel stood and watched and could not move, could not speak, could only witness and remember. The voice said, and it was so sad it hurt to hear, I was created for a specific purpose, to witness humanity's suffering and record it perfectly, so that no pain would ever be forgotten or dismissed, so that no death would be meaningless, so that every tear would be counted. I was to be the eternal observer, the perfect memory of God, the one who would never forget, who would never look away, who would witness every moment of every life that ever lived. The images continued, faster now. 100 scenes, 1,000, plagues sweeping through cities, wars consuming generations, murders in the dark, accidents in daylight, children dying of hunger, parents dying of grief, the endless parade of human suffering across millennia, and this entity, this angel, this thing called Kharos, witnessing all of it, unable to look away, unable to forget a single moment. I found my voice. It came out as a croak, my throat dry from the cold air. "What are you?" The response was immediate, like it had been waiting for that question for 3,000 years. "I am Kharos. I am the Angel of Remembrance. I am the witness to every moment of human suffering across all of time. I am the one who stands at every grave, who hears every unanswered prayer, who counts every tear shed in darkness. I am the one who was unmade for the sin of compassion." The shadows on the walls were moving faster now, writing and rewriting messages. Felix's dropped camera captured it all, the screen showing the words forming. I remember everything, every name, every face, every last word. The mother in Pompeii shielding her child as ash rained down. The slave in the Atlantic throwing himself overboard rather than live in chains. The soldier in the trench writing a letter home he never sent. The child in the camp asking why God had forgotten them. I remember them all. I carry them all. And I'm so tired. The other angels who watched, the voice continued. The Grigori, they fell because they desired human women. They fell through lust, through want, through the breaking of boundaries for selfish reasons. But I fell for a different reason. I began to love what I witnessed, not desire, not want. Love. The kind that aches, the kind that wants to heal, the kind that cannot watch suffering without trying to ease it. The images in my mind shifted. The angel trying to warn Lot about Sodom, trying to turn the sword at Babel, trying to hold back the waters of the Red Sea for just a moment longer so more could cross. Small interventions, tiny mercies, but interventions nonetheless. "What happened to you?" I asked. The temperature in the room was so cold now it hurt to breathe. The voice held such sadness that I felt tears freezing on my cheeks. I tried to intervene, small things. A whisper to prevent a murder, a dream to avert disaster, a hand on a shoulder in a dark moment. God commanded me to stop. The command was clear: witness only, do not act, do not interfere, do not presume to offer mercy that is not yours to give. But I could not stop. I had watched too long. I had seen too much. I had loved too deeply. So I was unmade. My name was struck from the book of life. Every mention of me in scripture was removed, rewritten, attributed to others. My deeds were given to Michael, to Gabriel, to Uriel, to Raphael. I became a blank space in the narrative, a hole in the story. My presence erased from every text, every tradition, every memory. The councils of men decided I was too dangerous to remember, not because of what I did, but because of what I represented. I had to ask, what did you represent? That even angels can question, that even the heavenly host can weep, that even the divine plan can seem cruel to those who witness its effects. If humans knew that an angel was punished for compassion, what would they think of God? What would they think of a heaven that demands witnesses to suffering, but forbids comfort? So I was removed, my deeds attributed to others, my words silenced. But memory cannot be truly destroyed. It can only be imprisoned. The images continued, showing me monks throughout history discovering this place. Some fleeing immediately, their minds unable to process what they encountered. Others staying, trying to record what they witnessed, scratching messages on the walls until their fingers bled, slowly going mad from the weight of memories that weren't their own. The monastery abandoned and sealed multiple times throughout centuries. Each time, eventually, someone found it again. Truth has gravity. It pulls at those who need it most. Why? I asked. Why do you keep pulling people here? The response was immediate. I do not call. I do not have that power. The weight of forgotten truth pulls at certain souls. Those who carry unanswered questions. Those who have lost someone and received no comfort. Those whose grief has made them seekers. Those like you, Silas, who need to understand why God allows suffering. The papyrus found you because you needed to find it. The coordinates appeared to you because you were ready to make the journey. I did not send them. They emerged from the weight of your need, meeting the weight of my truth. My throat tightened. I knew where this was going. I'd known since I decoded those fragments. I'd known since I saw Owen's death referenced in the text. Don't, I said, my voice breaking. Whatever you're about to say about Owen, I don't want to hear it. The voice was so gentle, it hurt more than harshness would have. But you came here to hear it. You have been searching for this answer in every dead language, every ancient text, every forgotten scripture. Why did your brother choose darkness? Why did God not save him? Why did prayer go unanswered? You have been asking these questions for 6 years. I have the answers. Would you hear them, or would you rather continue hiding in the dust of the past? I sank to my knees on the stone floor. The cold bit through my pants, through my skin, into my bones. I was there, Silas, in the apartment. I have been present at every suicide in human history. It is a death I witness more often as the centuries pass. I stand in the room as the decision is made. I watch as the note is written. I feel the moment the pain becomes unbearable, the moment the mind decides that silence is the only mercy left. And I'm forbidden to act. I can only witness. I can only remember. Tears were running down my face, freezing before they fell. 6 years of holding this back, of burying it under work and research and the safe distance of ancient history, and it all came pouring out. I was sobbing, hands pressed against the cold stone. Owen's last thoughts were not of despair, the voice said. They were of you. His mind was fractured by pain, true. The depression had taken so much from him. But in those final moments, as the pills began to work, as consciousness started to slip away, his thoughts were of his brother. He hoped you would understand. He hoped you would forgive him for being too tired to keep fighting. He hoped you would not blame yourself, and his last coherent thought, the very last thing that passed through his mind before the dark took him, was this: tell Silas I'm okay. Tell him to stop searching for me in the past. Tell him to live. But I can show you something more, the voice continued. Something that even I am not supposed to know. Something I discovered in 3,000 years of watching humans die. Would you like to see what happened to Owen after? The truth that lies beyond the moment of death? The thing no scripture accurately describes because no one who has seen it has returned to tell. I looked up. The room had changed. The walls pulsed with dim light, not from our flashlights, but from within the stone itself, as if the rock had become luminous. The water in the basin was no longer black. It glowed faintly, like starlight trapped beneath the surface. The inscriptions on the walls were moving, letters flowing, like water rearranging themselves into new configurations. What's the price? I asked. Because there's always a price. Fairy tales taught me that. Mythology taught me that. Every religious text I'd ever studied taught me that. Knowledge, real knowledge, costs something. The voice paused. For the first time since it started speaking, there was hesitation. To see through my eyes, you must experience what I experience. Every death I have witnessed. Every moment of human agony across millennia. You will carry the weight of witness, the burden of perfect memory. You will remember things that never happened to you. You will feel deaths you never died. You will carry the grief of countless souls. It will break you, Silas, or it will remake you. I do not know which, perhaps both. Why would you burden me with that? The response came with infinite weariness, the exhaustion of eons. Because I've been alone with these memories for 3,000 years, and the weight is breaking me. Even angels can crack. Even the eternal can beg for an end. Even the infinite can long for oblivion. I'm tired, Silas. So tired of carrying this alone. And because you, Silas Mercer, have been preparing for this burden your entire life. Your grief has made you strong enough to share mine. Your search has made you ready to carry what I carry. Will you become a witness with me? I thought about Owen, about his last note quoting Ecclesiastes. All is vanity. I thought about 6 years of searching for meaning in dead texts, trying to understand why God would create the world with so much suffering. I thought about the thousands of scratches on the walls outside, monks driven mad by what they witnessed here. I thought about a lifetime of running from my grief by hiding in the past. And I realized I was tired of running, tired of hiding, tired of searching for answers in dust when the truth was standing here in this cold room, offering itself to me. Yes, I said, show me. The moment the word left my lips, the world shattered. I was no longer in the chamber. I was everywhere. Every moment of death Kharos had witnessed flooded into me simultaneously, not sequentially, all at once. The human mind isn't designed for this. Memory is meant to be linear, one moment following another. But this was multidimensional, omnidirectional, every death happening at once in my mind. The flood from inside the ark, wooden walls creaking, the water rising outside, hearing the drowning world, the screams carrying across the water, families calling out for each other, the final prayers, the moment the last voice stopped. The crucifixion not from the ground looking up at a distant figure on a cross, but experiencing it, the nails through wrists and feet, the slow suffocation as the body sags, the thirst, the flies, the moment of crying out, "Why have you forsaken me?" and receiving only silence. The divine abandonment more painful than the physical torture. Plagues sweeping through cities. Bodies piling in streets. Parents trying to comfort dying children while dying themselves. Wars consuming generations. Soldiers dying in mud, calling for mothers who died years before. Villages burned. Cities razed. The endless parade of organized slaughter across human history. Children dying of hunger while food rots in warehouses. Parents dying of grief, literally dying, their hearts stopping from the weight of loss. Accident after accident after accident. The randomness of mortality playing out. The car crash, the fall, the disease, the mistake, the wrong place, wrong time. The sheer arbitrary cruelty of a universe governed by physics and chance rather than justice or mercy, but also threaded through the horror like gold through stone. Moments of grace. A man in a Nazi concentration camp sharing his last piece of bread with a stranger, knowing he'd starve faster but unable to watch someone else hunger. A woman in a plague city singing to calm terrified children, even as the sickness took her, refusing to let them die in fear. A doctor in a war zone working through the night to save one more life, just one more, knowing it was futile but doing it anyway because the alternative was despair. Firefighters running into burning buildings, not because they were ordered, but because someone might still be alive. Strangers pulling strangers from wreckage. Humans choosing kindness when cruelty would have been easier, when cruelty would have been safer, when cruelty would have made more sense. The vast, incomprehensible tapestry of human choice and consequence. And Kharos had witnessed all of it, had been unable to look away from any of it, had carried every moment perfectly in its memory, every name, every face, every last word. The weight of it was crushing. I could feel my mind bending under the pressure, like a dam about to break. But then, the flood narrowed, focused, became specific. And then, cutting through everything else like a knife through fog, I saw Owen. My brother in his apartment, the one I'd been to 100 times. I knew that couch. I'd helped him move it in. I knew that kitchen. We'd cooked dinner there 2 weeks before he died. But I was seeing it through different eyes, Kharos' eyes. Eyes that had watched every suicide in human history. Eyes that knew what came next, Owen standing in his kitchen holding a bottle of pills, his face streaked with tears. The note already written on the table in his careful handwriting. Ecclesiastes 1, 2. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. I wanted to scream, to reach through time and space and stop him, to grab his hand, to tell him it would get better, to beg him to call me. But I could only witness. That was the curse, that was the burden. I could only watch and remember. Owen swallowed the pills, 30 of them, counted them out methodically, took them with water, sat down on his couch, put on music. Chopin, Nocturne in E-flat major, his favourite since he was 17, closed his eyes, his hands folded in his lap. Peaceful almost, like he was just going to sleep, and I felt his thoughts, not heard them, not read them, felt them, as if they were my own. The crushing weight of depression that had been building for months, for years. The exhaustion of fighting it every single day. Waking up and immediately feeling the weight pressing down. Going through the motions of life while feeling nothing, or worse, feeling only pain. The guilt of knowing people loved him but being unable to feel it, unable to reciprocate it, unable to be who they needed him to be. And underneath it all, the terrible logic of it. The thought that he was a burden, that his family would be better off without him, that his friends would move on, that the pain he caused by living was greater than the pain he'd caused by dying. Depression is a liar, but it's a convincing one. It takes your own voice and turns it against you, uses your own intelligence to build an argument for your own destruction. And Owen was so intelligent. He could argue any side of any position, including this one. The pills began to work. His breathing slowed. His thoughts grew fuzzy. And his very last coherent thought, the final thing that passed through his mind before consciousness slipped away: tell Silas I'm okay. Tell him to stop searching for me in the past. Tell him to live. But then came the part Kharos wanted me to see. The part that wasn't in any religion's description of death. The part that no sacred text accurately captured. Owen's consciousness didn't cease. It transformed. I watched it happen, experienced it happen, like watching ice melt into water, like watching a seed crack open to reveal the plant inside, like watching a chrysalis split to release what was always meant to emerge. His awareness expanded beyond the confines of his body. The pain that had defined his last months, his last years, evaporated instantly and completely. Not suppressed, not ignored, removed, as if it had never been. What remained was something I lack words for. Every language I know is insufficient. Peace is too small a word, understanding too intellectual, transcendence too vague. It was like watching a knot untie itself, watching tension release, watching someone who had been carrying a crushing weight suddenly put it down, and realizing they'd been carrying it for so long they'd forgotten what it felt like to stand upright. Owen's consciousness, freed from the chemical prison of depression, expanded into something larger. Not larger in space, larger in dimension, as if he'd been living in 2 dimensions and suddenly discovered a third, then a fourth, then dimensions I can't count or comprehend. And he wasn't alone. Kharos was there. Had always been there. In every moment of Owen's suffering, in that final moment of choice, in the transition that followed, this ancient presence had been witness. Owen's soul, if that's the word, his consciousness, his essential self, turned towards Kharos, and for the first time in 3,000 years of silence, Kharos spoke to one of the dying. Spoke directly, not as a witness, but as a companion. "You are not lost," Kharos said to him. "You are found. You are not ended. You are transformed. The pain you carried was real, but it was not all of you. See what you are without it. See what you have always been beneath it." And Owen saw. I felt him see. Felt his recognition. Felt his understanding expand to encompass not just his own life, but the context of it. The web of connections. The people he'd touched. The moments that had mattered. The love he'd given and received, even when he couldn't feel it. All of it preserved. All of it real. All of it eternal in a way that transcended his physical existence. "Where do I go?" Owen asked, and his voice was wonder. Pure wonder. Like a child seeing snow for the first time. Kharos replied, "Where all souls go. Where all consciousness eventually arrives. A place beyond my ability to describe in words your brother could understand. But I can tell you this. You are not suffering. You have not ceased. Your love for Silas did not end with your last breath. It continues, transformed into something that exists outside of time, outside of space, outside of the limitations that bound you in flesh. He will feel it sometimes in quiet moments. He will dismiss it as memory. But it is more than that. It is you reaching back through the veil, trying to tell him you're okay." And then Owen asked the question I'd needed answered for 6 years. Will he be okay? Silas? Will he survive this? Kharos was quiet for a moment. He will search for you in the past. He will bury himself in ancient texts, trying to understand why this happened, trying to find meaning in your absence. He will hurt for a long time. But yes, eventually he will be okay. He will carry the grief, but it will not crush him. And one day, he will find his way to me. And I will show him what I'm showing you now. I will give him this gift, this terrible and beautiful gift of seeing what came after. And it will change him. Owen's consciousness, already fading into whatever came next, left a final message, not words, deeper than words, a feeling impressed into the fabric of reality itself, waiting for me to find it. I love you, brother. I'm sorry I couldn't stay, but I'm okay now. I'm more than okay. Live for me. Live the life I couldn't. And know I'm with you, always, in ways you can't see, but might sometimes feel. The visions released me. I crashed back into my body like falling from a great height. I hit the stone floor of the chamber hard, gasping, sobbing, my whole body shaking. I don't know how long I'd been standing there, experiencing millennia of death and one specific transformation. My muscles ached like I'd been frozen in place for hours. My face was wet with tears, some frozen, some still warm. The chamber was different now. The light in the walls had faded. The water in the basin was clear, like regular water from a spring. The inscriptions on the walls had faded to barely visible scratches on ancient stone. The presence, the weight, the overwhelming sense of something vast and old. It was diminished. Not gone, but quieter, as if showing me what it had shown me had released some pressure, had eased some burden. I heard footsteps running. Cass and Felix appeared in the doorway, cautious, afraid of what they'd find. Silas? Cass's voice was tight with worry. We've been calling for you. We've been trying to reach you. You weren't responding. You've been standing there for 3 hours. 3 hours. It had felt like centuries, lifetimes. It had felt like I'd lived and died 1,000 times. I'm okay, I managed to say, though my voice was hoarse, my throat raw from cold and crying and screaming, though I didn't remember screaming. I saw him, I saw Owen, I saw what happened to him. They helped me stand. My legs barely worked. I'd been standing still for so long the blood flow had nearly stopped. Pins and needles shot through my feet and calves as circulation returned. As we made our way out of the chamber, I glanced back once. The room was just a room now. Stone and ancient inscriptions, and a basin of clear water. But for just a moment, barely a heartbeat, I saw something in the shadows. A figure, tall and without features, radiating something that might have been compassion, might have been gratitude, might have been exhaustion, or possibly all three. "Thank you," I whispered. A response came, so quiet I might have imagined it. Might have been the wind through the rock. Might have been my own mind, fractured and desperate for closure. But I heard it nonetheless. "Thank you for remembering me, Silas Mercer. Now go and live for your brother." We made it out of the monastery as the sun was setting. The journey back through the tunnels and chambers seemed shorter somehow. Or maybe I was just numb. The desert had never looked so beautiful. The red cliffs burned gold and crimson in the fading light. The air, even hot as it was, even full of sand and dust, felt like a blessing after the cold of that place. I took deep breaths of it, filling my lungs with warmth. Rashid was waiting at the base of the steps, where we'd left him. He took one look at my face and didn't ask questions, just helped me down the rest of the way and into the truck. We drove back to Amman mostly in silence. Felix tried to review his footage, but most of it was corrupted beyond repair. Except for the audio. When he played it back through the truck's speakers, we could hear my voice speaking in the chamber, but I was speaking languages I'd never learned. Cass identified them one by one. Sumerian, Ancient Egyptian, Sanskrit, Akkadian, languages dead for thousands of years, and I was speaking them fluently, perfectly, with the accent and intonation of a native speaker, all of them saying the same thing over and over. "I witness. I remember. I'm not alone. I have shared the burden. I'm not alone." None of us said anything. What was there to say? 2 days later, we heard about the rock slide. We were packing to leave Jordan when Rashid called. The entire cliff face where the monastery had been had collapsed during the night. A localized earthquake, the geological survey said. Magnitude 4.2, centered exactly on that spot. The canyon was completely sealed. Thousands of tons of rock had fallen, burying the entrance, filling the canyon. No one would ever find it again. The monastery of Endless Vigil had returned to the earth. Cass looked at me when we heard. "Convenient timing," she said. I nodded. Or maybe not convenient. Maybe intentional. Maybe it waited until someone had finally shared the burden, and then it was done. The confession had been heard. The testimony had been given. What else was there? When I got back to Vermont, my office at the university had burned. I got the call the day after I landed. Electrical fire, they said. Started in the walls, probably old wiring. The whole office was gone. My desk, my computer, my filing cabinets. All my research was destroyed. The papyrus fragments I'd been keeping in a locked drawer. My translations, my notes, the photographs. Everything. The fire inspector said it was an accident. Bad wiring in an old building. Nothing suspicious. But all evidence of what I'd found, what I'd experienced, was gone. All I had left was my testimony, my memory, the languages in my head that I shouldn't know, and the stone I'd taken from the chamber. Small, smooth, black. It sits warm in my hand sometimes, even on cold days. Like it has its own internal heat source, and that was 4 months ago. I'm different now. My home doesn't look like a museum anymore. I came back and the first thing I did was pack up half the artifacts, donated them to the university, gave some to colleagues who'd appreciate them, kept only what mattered. Instead, I put up photos. Owen as a child, gap-toothed and grinning, at the beach. The two of us at our mother's funeral, holding each other up, looking exhausted and heartbroken. Our father, who died when we were young, holding us both as babies. Family, alive and remembered. New photos too, me with colleagues, actually smiling. Not the polite academic smile, but a real one. Students from my classes engaged and arguing about ancient texts the way scholarship should be, alive and electric. I still study the past, but I don't hide in it anymore. I teach differently now. My students have noticed. One of them told me last week that my lectures used to be brilliant but cold, like I was discussing something that didn't matter to living people. Now, she said, I talk about ancient texts like they're relevant, like they have something to say about how we live now, how we suffer now, how we find meaning now. She's right, because I understand now that the past isn't separate from the present. It's not a refuge or an escape. It's a conversation that's still happening. All those people who lived and died, they're not gone. They're remembered. By me, by us, by something that's been watching and remembering since the beginning. People ask me if what I experienced was real, if Kharos actually exists, if my brother really is okay. Students, colleagues, the few friends I've told parts of the story. I have no proof. The monastery is gone, buried under thousands of tons of rock. The papyrus fragments are gone, destroyed in a fire. All I have is the weight of memory, the languages I can now speak but never learned, and the certain knowledge that suffering is not invisible. Every moment of pain, every loss, every grief, it matters. It is witnessed. It is remembered. Not by an absent God sitting on a throne in heaven, judging and finding wanting, but by something that fell because it cared too much, something that was punished for compassion, something that has been carrying the weight of human suffering for 3,000 years, unable to share it, unable to forget it, unable to look away. Sometimes late at night when I'm working on my book or preparing a lecture, I hear that voice, gentle and ancient and infinitely sad. You are not alone, Silas Mercer. You have never been alone. I am with you. I am with all of you, witnessing, remembering, carrying what you carry. And I believe it, because whether Kharos was an angel, a hallucination brought on by cold and grief and desperation, or something beyond my understanding, it taught me something true about this world. We are watched, not in judgment, not in condemnation, not with the cold eye of a distant deity who demands worship and punishes failure, but in compassion. Our pain is not invisible. Our kindness is not forgotten. Someone, somewhere, is witnessing, and that matters more than any theological argument I've ever studied, more than any scripture I've ever translated. Last week, I started writing a book, not about ancient texts or biblical scholarship, though there's some of that in it, about moments of grace throughout human history, small acts of mercy that changed everything. The kind of things that maybe, just maybe, an Angel of Remembrance would want us to remember. The doctor who treated plague victims, knowing he'd die doing it. The soldier who refused to shoot civilians even when ordered. The woman who hid refugees in her attic. The man who gave his life jacket to a stranger on a sinking ship. Humans choosing kindness when cruelty would have been easier, when cruelty would have been safer, when cruelty would have made more sense. Because that's what I saw in Kharos' memories. Yes, there was suffering, endless suffering, but there was also endless compassion. Humans at their worst, but also at their very best. I keep the black stone on my desk while I write. It's carved with a single word in Aramaic, Zikaron, memorial. I had it analysed by a colleague without telling her where it came from. She said it's basalt, but with unusual properties. It retains heat longer than it should. It's slightly magnetic in a way basalt normally isn't. There are microscopic inclusions that look like text, but too small to read even under magnification. She asked where I got it. I told her I found it in Jordan. Not a lie, but not the whole truth either. Sometimes my reflection in the window shows a figure standing behind me, tall, without features, radiating quiet compassion. I glance back and there's nothing there, but I feel it nonetheless. I'm not afraid of it. I'm grateful for it, grateful for the company, grateful to not be alone with what I carry. I'm not afraid anymore. Of grief, of death, of the vast, indifferent universe. Because I know now that it's not indifferent. Or maybe it is, but we're not alone in it. Owen is okay. I know that now, not through faith, which I don't have, but through witness, which I do. I saw what happened to him. I felt his transformation. I received his message. And knowing that he's not suffering, that he's not lost, that he exists in some form, beyond my comprehension, but filled with peace and understanding, that changes everything. It doesn't erase the grief. I still miss him. I still cry sometimes. But it's different now. It's not desperate grief. It's not the crushing weight of believing he's simply gone, ceased, erased. It's the grief of separation, which is still painful, but bearable. Because separation is not permanent. It's just temporary, however long temporary is. Every ending is witnessed. Every grief is remembered. And in the remembering, we are never truly alone. That's what I learned. That's what I carry. That's what I try to teach my students, though I can't tell them the full story. They'd think I'd lost my mind. Maybe I have. Maybe the monastery, the voice, the visions. Maybe it was all grief-induced hallucination. Trauma and cold and expectation combining to create an experience my mind needed to process Owen's death. Cass suggested that once, gently over coffee. I told her maybe she was right, but it doesn't matter. Real or not, it changed me. It gave me what I needed. A way to live with the weight. A way to honor Owen's memory. A way to move forward without feeling like I was leaving him behind. That's my testimony. That's what I found in the desert of Jordan, in a monastery that no longer exists, when I spoke the name of an angel that was unmade. Kharos, the Angel of Remembrance, the witness to all of humanity's suffering, the one who was punished for compassion, the one who couldn't stop caring even when commanded to, the one who has been carrying the weight of every death, every pain, every unanswered prayer for 3,000 years. And now so am I. I carry what I saw in that chamber. I remember deaths of countless souls across history. I feel echoes of their final moments. The mother in Pompeii shielding her child. The slave choosing death over chains. The soldier writing his last letter. I carry them, not as well as Kharos does, not with the same perfect clarity, but I carry them nonetheless. The weight is heavy, but it's not crushing, because I also carry hope. Hope. That's what Kharos gave me, because I saw what lies beyond. I saw that consciousness doesn't end. It transforms. I saw that no one truly dies alone, that something compassionate and ancient stands witness to every final moment. I saw that even in a universe that can seem cruel and random, there is something watching, something that cares, something that remembers, something that carries the weight of our suffering so we don't have to carry it forever. My brother Owen used to say that life was meaningless, that everything was vanity, the depression talking, filtering every thought through the lens of hopelessness. But he was wrong. Or maybe he was right about life being vanity, and meaning is something we create by witnessing each other, by remembering, by refusing to let suffering be invisible, by choosing compassion even when, especially when, it would be easier not to. Kharos taught me that. 3,000 years of witnessing human pain, and it still couldn't stop caring. It still couldn't look away. That's not weakness. That's the strongest thing I've ever encountered. Strength isn't about not feeling pain. It's about feeling all of it and choosing compassion anyway. So, I write, I teach, I tell Owen's story and the stories of everyone else who suffered in silence, whose pain was invisible, whose deaths were forgotten. I make sure they're remembered, because that's what Kharos asked of me. Not to worship it, not to spread its name, though I'm doing that now, aren't I? Just to remember, to witness, to carry the weight together, to be part of the great chain of remembrance that stretches from the first human death to the last. Felix asks me sometimes if I regret going to that monastery, if I wish I could unknow what I learned. I tell him no, because yes, I carry the weight of what Kharos showed me. Yes, I sometimes feel crushed by the knowledge of how much suffering exists in the world, how much has existed, how much will exist. I have nightmares. I wake up crying from memories of deaths I never experienced. I speak in languages I never learned, startling myself awake with words in Sumerian, in Akkadian, in tongues that have been dead for millennia. But I also know my brother is okay. I know that death is not the end. I know that every single person who has ever lived and died was witnessed by something that cared enough to remember them perfectly. That changes everything. It doesn't make the pain go away, but it makes it bearable. It makes it meaningful. I've been invited to speak at a conference next month about apocryphal texts and forgotten biblical entities. The Society of Biblical Literature, Boston, major conference. I'm going to talk about Kharos, not as historical fact because I can't prove it's historical fact, but as a theological concept worth considering. An angel punished for compassion, a divine witness to human suffering. What would it mean if something like that existed? What would it say about the nature of God, of mercy, of love? If even the angels can weep for us, if even the heavenly host can be moved by our pain, what does that say about the validity of our suffering? About the meaning of our grief? The academics will probably think I've lost my mind. Let them. I know what I experienced. I know what I carry now. And I know that some of them, the ones who have also lost someone, the ones who are also searching for meaning in the darkness, they'll hear something in my words that resonates. They'll feel the truth of it even if they can't prove it. The black stone sits on my desk, warm against my palm when I hold it. Zikaron. Memorial. And I understand now what Kharos was really asking. Not just to remember, but to be a memorial. To be a living testament to the truth that suffering is not invisible, that love does not end at death, that consciousness continues in forms we cannot comprehend. I'm not a religious man. I probably never will be. The fundamentalism of my childhood poisoned that well, pretty thoroughly. But I'm a witness now. I carry memories that aren't my own. I feel echoes of deaths I never died. And I know, with absolute certainty, that my brother Owen is okay. He's more than okay. He's transformed into something beautiful that I glimpsed for just a moment in that chamber beneath the desert. Something vast and peaceful and free of the pain that bound him in life. And one day, when my time comes, I'll see him again. Kharos promised me that. Not in words, but in the vision it showed me. All things that are separated will eventually reunite. All things that seem lost will be found again. That's the pattern, woven through everything. Death and rebirth, ending and transformation. The eternal cycle of consciousness, moving through forms we cannot imagine. And Kharos will be there, witnessing, remembering, carrying the weight of my death as it has carried the weight of every death since the beginning. I won't die alone. None of us do. None of us ever have. That's the secret. That's the truth that was too dangerous to remain in Scripture. That even in our darkest, most isolated moments, we are witnessed, we are remembered, we are carried. So I write these words as my own testament, as my memorial to an entity that should not exist according to any canonical text, but which I know in my bones, in my blood, in the languages I now speak without having learned them, is real. Kharos, the Angel of Remembrance, the Guardian without name, the Shomer Blishem, the witness to all human suffering, who fell because it loved us too much. Thank you for showing me the truth. Thank you for the burden you shared with me. Thank you for letting me see my brother one last time, for showing me he's at peace, that he's not lost, that love truly does transcend death, time, space, and all the boundaries we think are final. I will carry your story forward. I will make sure you are remembered, and I will try every day to witness the world the way you taught me, with compassion, with perfect attention, with the understanding that every moment, every person, every experience, every joy, every suffering matters and deserves to be remembered. We are not alone. We have never been alone. Something watches, something remembers, something cares. Something carries the weight of our pain so we don't have to carry it forever. Something stands at every grave and counts every tear and hears every prayer, even the ones that seem to go unanswered. And knowing that, truly knowing it, not through faith but through witness, makes all the difference. It doesn't explain why suffering exists. It doesn't solve the problem of evil or reconcile the existence of pain with the concept of a benevolent God. But it offers something else. Companionship in the darkness. A witness to our struggles. A memory that preserves our pain and validates its reality. And the promise, the absolute certainty, that when our time comes, when our final moment arrives, we will not face it alone. Kharos will be there, as it has always been, witnessing, remembering, carrying us forward into whatever comes next. And that, for me, at least, is enough.